Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to wait a couple more seconds, and then we will get this webinar started. Wait for a few more people to trickle in. Bruce to get settled. Okay, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar. Our security team has some thrilling tales to share about cybersecurity, and we're excited to have a little bit of Halloween-themed fun with our session together today. And we will be sharing some solid advice for warding away some of these spooky hackers that have been knocking at our doors. So, some stage setting items I want to cover before we begin. Quick introduction to myself. My name is Caroline Wood, and I work at NetGain Technologies as Marketing Administrator, and I'm going to be playing the role of moderator for today's webinar. Questions are encouraged throughout the webinar. You can use the question option or the chat feature in GoToWebinar to submit any and all comments, questions, or feedback during the webinar. If you've got any questions after the fact, though, about the content or topics we covered today, please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to meet with you or share some additional content, information, resources about these security topics and more. Finally, a recorded version of this presentation is going to be sent to all attendees, and it's also going to be made available on the NetGain website too. And we're going to be sending an email sharing those details once the content is available and we've got the video rendered and everything. So that being said, let's get this panel party started. I'm going to begin with some general introductions to our security team first. I'm going to be going around the room, and they're going to share their professional experience, which is going to help paint a diverse picture of what cybersecurity can really entail from different angles of support, from proactive to reactive security services. So let's go around the room, and I will let them introduce themselves, share their background and roles within IT and cybersecurity. So I am going to give the floor to Braxton Moulton first.
Thanks, Caroline. My name is Braxton. I'm the Technical Director of Security at NetGain Technologies. I've been in IT for several years at this point, and my primary role at NetGain is to operate as a VCSO, or Virtual Chief Security Officer, for our clients across many different verticals, and working with them to help improve their cybersecurity posture.
Thanks, Braxton. Our next panelist is Aaron Shade.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm Aaron. I work on the security help desk here at NetGain. I handle various types of security alerts. I analyze reports and have a primary focus on vulnerability scanning, assessment, and remediation.
Thanks, Aaron. Last but certainly not least, we have Bruce Noe.
Hi, my name is Bruce Noe. I'm a senior security engineer here at NetGain, focusing on vulnerability assessments, penetration tests, results, and remediation projects, as well as I'm involved in forensic investigations of data breaches and security incidents. Been in IT for over 25 years, and I've been here at NetGain for 3 of those.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce. Happy to have you all join us today. So now that we've introduced the team, let's move into the actual content of the webinar. We're here to talk about the horrors of cybersecurity. So cybercrime and security breaches have been in the headlines for quite some time now, but this past year has really seen some truly scary incidents in the news. So small and large organizations alike have been the targets for hackers, and really it's across all industries. I mean, it's from primary schools to hospitals, construction companies to government agencies. It's kind of a global phenomenon, and it has everyone scrambling to fortify their defenses. So we're going to begin our time together by recounting some of these notable incidents. In a tale of 2022 cyber threats, We'll explore some of the key types of cybercrime that's impacting most businesses. We'll begin with data and why are demons after your data. Phishing phantoms. We'll explore how phishing scams are getting even trickier with social engineering schemes. We'll talk a little bit about MFA and MFA monsters. And last, but certainly not least, in this category, we'll go over ransomware rampage. And really, this is kind of a wild and really viable market today. And I'm talking billions with a B for ransomware in the cyber criminal sphere, where essentially people are getting paid to hack networks and hold data for ransom. So that's going to be a particularly scary segment in today's webinar. Then, if we haven't frightened you off by that point, we're going to cover some tactics and tips for how to ward off some of these cyber villains. There's simple things you can do today to protect your castle, if you will, and there's also some larger moves you can make with more complex security protocols and more robust practices to better protect and empower your empire, your castle, adding some different moats and maybe like some drawbridges or something through some different security protocols. But anyway, I digress. Last but certainly not least, we are going to have some time for open Q&A at the end, and you will have the opportunity to pick the security team's brains about some of their stories and experiences within cybersecurity. So let the scary stories begin with data demons. And before we really dig into some of these recent data breaches, I think it would be helpful for the team to kind of explain what data is and why it's so valuable to cyber criminals. So Braxton, you first. What is data?
Yeah. So in your business, if you think about your employees and your executive leadership team as the heart of your business, data is the blood. It's what gets pumped through. It's what makes your business tick. Data is made up of several things, and many of those is personally identifiable information, which is names and locations and addresses of potentially your employees, potentially customers. Personally identifiable financial information that can be traced back to your business. So if you're thinking of like a private organization or private business, your financial records getting out there, and then also any financial records that again could be linked back to someone in particular, as well as if you're in healthcare, healthcare records and patient confidentiality is extremely critical. Those are very sensitive records and are highly protected. And then if you even branch out to like say manufacturing, intellectual property, proprietary data, something that's unique to you, that is only from you, that you are aware of, and maybe that's how you conduct business a certain way. Maybe it's a product that you've invented or created. All of that is important and encompasses what we know of as data. And as a little caveat to that, depending on what vertical you're in, if you're thinking banking, financial, or healthcare, you might have compliance requirements. Where there is a regulating body behind that requires you to have certain security controls to protect your data, to protect your business, to protect your clients and your customers. So your data is incredibly valuable, not just to you, but also to hackers that want it.
Aaron, true or false question for you. Everyone has data.
That would be true. Some of you are probably looking at this thinking, well, we're a small business. We don't work in healthcare. We're not a bank. We don't have any critical data. And this couldn't be further from the truth. At the very least, you have your employees' PII data, and that needs to be protected just as much. Also, Braxton touched on, intellectual property. You have proprietary data that's unique to your company, and this is absolutely critical. So everyone has data, and it should be protected as if you were protecting banking information or health information.
Appreciate that bit of an education session, Aaron and Braxton. And I'm now going to pose a quick poll to our attendees. What kinds of data do you work with and manage? So quick little easy poll. We'll give everybody a few seconds to answer. And we just thought this would be kind of a fun way to engage with everyone to see maybe like the kind of variety of data that people work with day to day. So I'll wait a couple more seconds. It looks like all of our data categories are covered, but interestingly enough, it's primarily banking and finance that most of our people today who are attending deal with. So closing the poll, very interesting. So it looks like 80% of you all have banking and finance, and then a close second, a little over 50%, is PII, which is personally identifiable information. So very interesting. Moving right along, talking a little bit more in depth about data and data breaches. You know, there's been several notable ones that have occurred over the past few years. You know, naturally, as our lives become more digital and our information is increasingly stored in the cyber world, there's increased interest and incentive for cyber criminals to try to access it for nefarious reasons. This year, though, criminals are on a whole other level. And I want us to focus on incidents that have occurred over the past several months this year. Braxton, can you kick things off for us and offer some background on some of these data breaches that we've witnessed?
Yeah, so we'll just go down the line here and we'll talk about crypto.com. You know, that's a brokering website for cryptocurrency. Cash App, another application for transferring funds back and forth. VPN applications, that's a virtual private network. Chances are, if you've worked remotely at all this year, you've most likely used a VPN to some degree. It's like Super VPN, Gecko VPN, Chat VPN, and then Twitter. I would imagine most everybody knows what Twitter is. It's one of the biggest social media websites that we have. It's been in the news recently for a particular billionaire getting ready to purchase it. But all of these companies have been attacked. And these are across different types of services that they provide. And some takeaways that we need to learn from on this is, for the case of crypto.com, they were attacked in January of 2022. They were made aware of their breach, and they originally thought that they had no money stolen. And then 6 months later down the line, come to find out that 30 million is gone. That's quite the leap from 0 to now 30 million. So the tricky part about having data breaches like this is you don't know the full story right away, and it's ever evolving and it's ever changing. And then Twitter, these are big applications and big organizations. They have plenty of money to spend on their cybersecurity budget, and they're still being breached and they're still being attacked. So all of these organizations that have cybersecurity budget and they have access to millions of user accounts, $30 million in funds that can be taken away, 8.2 million customers that are utilizing their application. That's all data that gets tied back to you to some degree. And it's important that we, when we talk about making sure that you're being hygienic with your cybersecurity, one of the things we need to be cautious about is using like a work email to sign up for one of these third-party applications, because they are targets and they will be hit at some point.
Absolutely. And just to expand on that a little bit more, you look at this slide and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, well, we're not crypto.com, we're not Twitter, we're not one of these big companies that has $30 million to steal or 5 million user accounts, right. So why would anyone come after us? But what the slide doesn't show you is all the small, medium-sized businesses that are affected by these data breaches. Those don't make headlines. They might make the local newspaper on page 7, the newspaper that nobody reads anymore. But the truth is, these SMBs are actually a bigger target. And the reason why is I highly doubt anyone here has a security team in their IT department as robust as crypto.com or as Twitter, like Braxton was talking about. Simply don't have the budget for it. So just to put it into perspective for you, there's an article on vectorrock.com that Chase Bank actually shared that they spend about $600 million per year on cybersecurity fees. That's an insane amount of money, but you have to think about what they're protecting.
Right.
And you put yourself in the attacker's shoes, and who would you rather go after? Chase Bank with an entire cybersecurity division with analysts and security operations center that are monitoring network traffic and potentially malicious things going on 24/7, or maybe the local bank that has 2 branches and the IT department consists of about 3 people, if they're lucky. If it can happen to these big guys, it can happen to you.
Yeah, and I'll add to Aaron's, if you look at the average cost, according to a recent 2022 report, the average cost to recover from a ransomware event, for example, on average for small to medium businesses is anywhere from $3 to $4 million. For some small to medium businesses, that can put them out of business.
And it is putting them out of business, which is
it is putting
unfortunately,
them out of business. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, what we've been seeing. And Bruce, on that note, I'm going to have you delve into just September of this year, some of the
absolutely.
data breaches we've been experiencing. Yeah, go ahead.
So September has been a very, very busy month in the security landscape. I'm going to highlight the big 4 that really happened in September. You've got a little hauling company to help you move from city to city named U-Haul. They were actually breached, and the attackers had access to every single U-Haul contract from the contract portal, along with the usernames and their driver license numbers. And if you think like a hacker, I have those 2 pieces of information. I can get pretty dang far in starting to own your identity. What's funny is, not really funny, but more scary than anything, is they were actually in the environment from November of 2021 until April of 2022. U-Haul, however, didn't discover the breach until July. And then they actually announced it in September. So that alone is scary, not knowing that they were in there. Moving on along to a little ride company called Uber. They were breached, and that impacted 57 million riders and driver accounts. So quite a bit of information was gotten that way. And really how the hackers got into Uber was through social engineering. They posed as a corporate IT worker and got a Uber contractor to reveal the password using a little thing called MFA bombing, because it basically gave, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth here in a bit, caused MFA fatigue. For some of us gamers, while it was cool to see the upcoming game screenshots leaked out to the web, Rockstar Games, another victim of a network intrusion, and this 18-year-old hacker actually got in and pulled down early footage and source code for the game and released it publicly. And then there's Cisco, who is also another victim of MFA fatigue or prompt bombing. They were successfully infiltrated. The contractor, again, something about contractors, I guess, got MFA fatigues and finally hit accept, and the hacker got in. What the hackers provided, once they were caught and booted off, they decided to keep trying to come after Cisco and emailed several executives asking for money, or they were going to release the screenshots of their data to the web. That's still going on, that investigation. They haven't caught the person that did that, but Cisco caught it very quickly, and they put controls in place to keep that from happening again. They did issue a company-wide, and Cisco is a very large company, a company-wide password reset in order to combat anything that they may have or may not have stolen, right? Big uptick at the end of September and here into October has been ransomware. Catholic Health Initiatives, which has hospitals in over 14 states, Lexington, Kentucky being one of them, have shut down their EHR because it had gotten ransomware. And so they're currently investigating and recuperating from that. And LA Unified School District in Los Angeles, you know, they're not only just going for the businesses, they're now coming after our children's data more and more. And, you know, LA Unified School District is currently being held for ransom for all of their data. So it's going to say, I can say October has been a very ghoulish, crazy month. Lots of information on the intel that our teams get from, and it's just really getting expensive if you get captured and ransomed or breached.
Yeah. Bruce, you bring up a lot of scary statistics in October, so thank you for that, I guess, but helps me to transition to my next slide. October has been labeled as the biggest month in the biggest year ever for hacking activity. The total hacked value for the month, nearly $718 million. That's a lot. And if everybody looks at their calendar right now, there's still a few days left in the month, so it's still ongoing, and hopefully the rest of the year won't look quite as scary as this. But I mean, there's something to be said for these statistics. So it's all quite trendy in not good ways. That being said, I'm going to transition us into another quick poll to our participants. All this being said, how secure do you think your data is? And once again, this is an anonymous survey, and you know, please answer as honestly as you can. And this time, I'm going to try to share the poll results with the audience too. For the most part, it looks like everybody's feeling fairly secure about their data. Couple more seconds to respond, and then I will close out the poll. Yeah, this is a question I feel like I gets brought up a lot. Is my data, can it be too secure? And I don't know. That could maybe be a question we could answer in the Q&A portion at the end of our segment. But I'm going to close out the poll and share it pretty quickly. It looks like, for the most part, people feel somewhat secure about their data, but maybe it could use a little bit more. So that's kind of my mindset when it comes to security, is there's always probably a little bit more that you could be doing in terms of buttoning up your posture, if you will. Moving right along into phishing phantoms. They are swooping into inboxes and phones alike. Let's explore what criminals have been phishing for and maybe how they've been casting their lures. So, Aaron, tell us a little bit about phishing schemes and maybe offer us some background on this screenshot that we've got up here right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So phishing emails are nothing new. They've been around since the birth of the internet. I remember late 90s, early 2000s, getting plenty of emails from the Nigerian prince who needed my help, right? I think we all remember these. They're still around.
Yep.
They just needed some help getting their millions of dollars out of the country, and all you had to do was send them a little bit of money up front, you know, some personal info, your bank account info, of course, so they could wire you a portion of their fortune for helping them. Hopefully we're all aware of this by now. It's pretty obvious, unless you're Michael Scott from Dunder Mifflin and you're supporting about 15 of these Nigerian princes, right? But phishing emails today we're seeing aren't so obvious. They're getting better. They've upped their game. So, and it doesn't matter where you work. I'm sure you're bombarded with tons of emails every day, and we just really don't have time to investigate each and every email and make sure nothing fishy's going on. But with a little bit of training, a little bit of awareness, they can become easier to spot. So we'll take a quick look at this email example here, this phishing email example. Dissect it a little bit, show you some obvious clues that you can pick out to hopefully spot these right away and not waste too much of your time on them. So if we start at the very top with the subject, there's an issue with your American Express account. It's a little off, but it could be easily be overlooked. There's usually going to be misspellings and some grammatical errors throughout the email. That's a good sign. A big company like American Express, they're not gonna have misspellings in their emails. And then if we go down and take a look at the name and the sender's email address there, it says American Express, pretty normal. But if you look at the sender's email, that doesn't look like an official American Express email to me. So that would be a pretty big red flag right there. Going down to the logo on the right hand side there. Once again, just looks a little off. It kind of looks scrunched together. Doesn't even really look like the right font. So there's another clue there. And then you get into the body of the email. Due to recent activities on your account, we placed a temporary suspension until you verify your account. This should really stand out, and this is what they try to do. They try to create this sense of urgency, or almost threatening you, that law enforcement will get involved if you don't take action now. They might be impersonating a family member, that needs help. And you'll see things like act now, immediate action required, click here to review your account. And this tactic works on all types of people because it's a mind trick. It takes your focus off the email, and now you're thinking, oh, I don't want my account to be suspended. I don't want them to lock my card. I have an American Express card. I just used it for gas this morning. They can't lock it. What happened? Something happened. And unfortunately, this gets a lot of elderly people. They're not on top of it like some of us are. So it's very scary, but it should be pretty obvious. Whenever American Express isn't going to send this through an email. That's just not going to happen. So, but then we get to the link there, the click here. So a little trick when you get these external emails, if you hover your mouse just over the link, don't click it, but just hover the mouse over top of it, the actual address that it's sending you to will pop up in a little box right above the cursor. So if you suspect it's a phishing email, you put your mouse over the link, and there's a good chance you'll see a bunch of gobbledygook letters, numbers, and all kinds of weird things. And once again, it's not going to look like an official American Express website. So this is just a generic example here. I'm sure we've seen all different versions of this, with different banks and different companies. So, but Bruce is actually going to show you something that is truly frightening. So hopefully it's not too scary.
Yeah, so what you see up here on the screen is an actual email that we captured and investigated from a company. And so, one of the quickest and easiest ways for a hacker to get money is to go after your accountants, your accounts payable people. And in this case, they went after the accounts payable person. And this is utilizing consent phishing and then impersonation. So the valid email you see down on the bottom portion of the screen, there were a couple things in it that really made me really look harder at the email headers on the string of emails from the impersonator. But if you look at the signature field down at the bottom of the email there, the actual person had a space between his name and job title and the name of the company and the company's contact info. In comparison to the impersonated email above, and we've got the call outs blown up so we can see it a little bit more better, is there was no space in the signature. And if you're looking at the screen, you can actually see a very almost white gray shade in the signature box that really brought me to look at the headers a little bit heavier. And so in that theme of looking at the header, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, please. The valid email, header, what we would expect to see being secured with TLS 1.2 through Outlook and delivering to the vendor's email server was right there on the left. However, the hacked email, the impersonated email, they routed it through a proxy in France and changed the vendor name. Didn't change, however, they changed the email address to forward any communication now going to Martin Sumeyer to a hacking account, and this was a hacker's proxy email account in France that we were able to track back to in Nigeria, and it was probably one of those Nigerian princes that we all love. But it was very apparent just from a header investigation of the emails to see where it started, where it went, and how it ended up. And once that hacker implemented that email address change, the remaining communications from the accounts payable person was actually going to the hacker in Nigeria via France. So they're getting very tricky, but they're very easy to impersonate. And if you're not trained to really notice those kinds of changes, they can get you pretty easily.
Thank you for that, Bruce and Aaron. Scary tactics indeed. Moving right along into MFA monsters. MFA should not be a new acronym to anyone, but in case it is, I would like for our security team to give our audience a quick lesson before we hop into how and why MFA is so important. So, Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about MFA and its different forms and functions?
Sure. So multi-factor authentication and two-factor authentication, essentially the same things. Almost everybody says MFA, but they might only use two factors. But MFA is basically a multi-layered protection framework that verifies the identities of the users. Most common form of authentication we're all familiar with is a password, right? That's one factor, or a PIN maybe for your debit card. So what multi-factor authentication is using two or more different forms of authentication. So there's 4 types of authentication. One would be something you know, that would be a password or a PIN number. Number 2 would be something you have, like a hard token, which would be a key fob that you scan, or an ID card. Maybe you have a mobile phone with an authenticator app on it that, a little token pops up on it. Number 3 would be something you are, so it'd be biometrics like an iris scanner, maybe a fingerprint scanner. And then a 4th one, which is a little bit newer, is somewhere you are, so your location, right? So now we know the 4 types. Multi-factor is simply putting 2 or more together, okay? But they need to be different forms, like I said before. So not a password and a PIN; those are both something you would know. But maybe a password and a hard token. So you have something you know plus something you have. If you want to be even more secure, you could add somewhere you are. So you're only allowed to sign in from certain geographic locations.
Correct.
But the point being, passwords alone, they can easily be hacked, and it's just not enough.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Aaron. Now, Bruce, you mentioned MFA fatigue earlier when we were recounting some notable data breaches. Can you tell us a little bit about what this is?
Yeah, so MFA fatigue, let's put it into the context of Halloween, if you will. I don't want to rehash the details of the attack, but the problem underlying at Uber, for example, was how did it happen? he got pelted. And what I mean by that is, look at it in Halloween terms, much like your kid at home at Halloween. Mom, can I have more candy? Can I have another one? Can I have another one? Can I have another one? Finally, mom's just going to say, okay, you can have it. And that's in essence what happened here. They were just worn down, and they just gave in. So here's my pro tip, is don't approve an MFA notification unless you're actually the one that triggered it, because you have control over it. And there's a screenshot up here on the screen. In addition to the passcode factor of authentication, Microsoft is actually forcing it to be the default with Office 365. In addition to that passcode, when you get your 6-digit number, once you type that into the box, they're then going to send to you what's called numbering authentication. So you actually have to type in 83, and they've incorporated it with the location based. So they'll pop up a box on your authenticator on your phone or your computer, and they'll say, okay, you're putting in 83. Are you actually here in Australia at this location? And then you can click yes or no to be able to get in, because the hackers won't actually have your device. They can steal your MFA code by doing fatigue, and then register their own devices. However, if you're in Kentucky and all of a sudden you're being asked, are you in Australia? You better very quickly put, no, it's not me. So those are two things that are actually going to be default as of last week for Microsoft Office 365 Exchange Online.
Thank you for that, Bruce. Moving right along into our next frightful topic, ransomware. We've seen some wild numbers and figures in the news in terms of the ransomware demands hitting some large companies, but small agencies are by no means being overlooked, though, by these hackers. And quoting IBM in a recent cybersecurity report they published, ransomware is one of cybercrime's strongest business models, and it's technically a billion-dollar industry. Braxton, I'm going to toss this topic over to you first. Tell us about ransomware and maybe some of the incidents that you've been privy to or have even helped with.
Yeah. So look, if we really wanted to, we could have one webinar on just one of these types of attacks alone. And ransomware is no exception. And in fact, we have had a webinar about ransomware before. And one of the big things about ransomware is it's, number one, it's become far more prevalent in the last 2 to 3 years. The biggest reason behind that is that it makes money. And the article that Caroline just mentioned here, we're talking trillions of dollars. So it is a business, and it's so successful and so fruitful that ecosystems of hacking groups that are putting their services out there to what we call ransomware as a service groups, where you can employ them for them to attack other organizations and businesses, and they'll ransom, and they get obviously a cut of whatever ransom that they get from that. So it's very fruitful, and because of this, we're seeing more and more rise of it. I have some, unfortunately, some pretty extensive firsthand knowledge and experience with the ransomware incidents, and a lot of the times when this has happened, it's because of misconfigured devices, misconfigured operating systems, or failed patching. And what will happen is what the ransomware group and what the whole point of this attack is, what it's hoping for is that you don't have a recoverable model. And in fact, they will attack your recoverable model. I'm talking about your backups and your disaster recovery plans. They will look to encrypt those files and make sure that you no longer have access to them. And they're banking on that so that you have no other choice other than to pay a ransom. Now, our stance is pretty holistically that you shouldn't pay the ransom. And if you exercise, proper backups and disaster recovery, you'll be in the best position to not be forced to do that.
Bruce, any advice or insights you can add to this topic?
Just to add on to what Braxton mentioned about backups is, have good backups, have immutable backups, which are air-gapped away from if you're an Active Directory, don't have your backup servers a member of the Active Directory domain is a good one. But immutable backups off-site in the cave in Southern Kentucky, in a vault, have some data that is air-gapped, and immutable. And what I mean by immutable is it's backup data that cannot have any changes made to it. It's written once, read many, because a lot of the exploits these days, when they try to get into your backup data, they will try to change it. If it's air-gapped, they can't change it. And then additionally, Braxton mentioned patching. If you have servers in your environment that haven't received Microsoft updates in a year to 2 years, I would advise get on a patch cadence, because those patches, they're patching exploits. And if you can close that exploit or attack vector down, then you're protecting yourself more. If you're not doing a monthly, we hear about Patch Tuesday. If you're not doing a monthly patch after testing your patches, you're putting your company and yourself at risk. So a very good risk management process is a must, in my opinion.
Thank you for that, Bruce. And now that we've thoroughly frightened the audience, I think it's time to offer maybe some more advice in addition to what the team's already been kind of hinting at throughout these different security topics that we've already covered. But let's give people some more advice, maybe offer a little bit of hope. Let's bring some light to the end of this dark security tunnel. And Aaron, I'll start with you first. What can businesses do today to better protect themselves, their people, their data, et cetera?
Sure. Two big things I want to hit on. The first two topics here, think before you click and update your software, kind of go hand in hand with these things. There's something that you can do, starting right now. It's not hard to implement, and you need to be continuously doing them. One would be education. You need to educate and train your employees. Employees are the weakest link in your company. It doesn't matter how secure your environment is. All it takes is one Bob or Betty down in accounts receivable to click on that phishing email on that malicious link, and now you're compromised. So end users are the gatekeepers. So they need to be educated and trained continuously, because the trends change as well. I recently saw that there were phishing emails where you could help the Ukrainians. So they're keeping up with current trends, things going on in the world. So you need to be constantly training, constantly educating. And the second thing would be vulnerability scanning, penetration testing. We recommend at a minimum once a quarter. Vulnerability scanning, if you don't know, is just the process of discovering, analyzing, reporting any security flaws, weaknesses, vulnerabilities found in your environment. Everything from the applications you run, the systems, servers, even mobile devices. It'll find outdated protocols and then give you steps for remediation of those things. So, and then a pen test on top of that takes those weaknesses that it finds and exploits them, attempts to exploit them. So you can really see if a hacker was to, breach your network, what would he be able to obtain? What could he steal? So I'll let Braxton talk a little bit more about those.
Yeah, so Aaron, you hit on some pretty big points there. When it comes to like user training, the user is the weakest link for an organization typically when it comes to cybersecurity preparedness, which is why having like a solution or a program for cybersecurity training is vital. We do it ourselves. You might think that myself and Bruce and Aaron, we would be A+ when it comes to always picking out like phishing emails and not succumbing to them. But the reality is that we're all human, and we all get busy. And when we're flying, 100 miles an hour and we get an email in and we don't go through every single one of the steps that Aaron outlined earlier for red flags that we would look at, and maybe, one or two things start to check out and we're busy, we might, be more apt to just, doing whatever that email needs us to do because it seems legitimate because we didn't have enough time or didn't give it enough time thoroughly. And then if an attacker or a hacker doesn't get into your environment through a phishing email, well, probably the other way they're going to get in is through something not being patched or vulnerability. We see zero-day vulnerabilities come through constantly, and it's only going to happen more and more. Mm-hmm. And we're not. It's hard for us to be prepared for that because the whole point of a 0-day is that we weren't aware of it until that moment and when it gets disclosed. So keeping everything up to date there, but also in addition, we did talk about how passwords aren't enough, but that doesn't mean you can't improve your passwords. Use strong passwords. The reality is that length is king when it comes to passwords. I know we always talk about, having like 8 characters minimum with complexity. Complexity is great, but actually if you have a longer password, more in like with a passphrase, where you start talking about, 16, 32 characters even, it's just a sentence that it makes up something that only you would know. It's much, much harder for a script or a bot to actually brute force that and break in as opposed to like an 8-character password with some special characters. If you can have both, that's great. But in combination with all 3 of those things, you're sitting even better. So Bruce, how about you round us off with this last bullet here?
Yeah, and just to add something on passphrases, if you do a 32-character length password, it can still be brute force cracked much easier than these bots than if you use the passphrase, because the current bots that they're using for password spraying, for example, they can't translate spaces and punctuation marks. For example, mine's 45 characters long. It has quite a few spaces in it and a few punctuation marks. It will take them a long time to get my password. But following on to the last item is implement some type of multi-factor authentication. At a minimum 2, if you can incorporate all 4, you're just protecting yourself much, much more. I can't drive home some type of multi-factor in use, both in your professional and your personal life.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Bruce. And these 4 tips that we've got up here are directly from from CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. This is October, which is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and I am going to send the link to everyone for more information and details. But I would say 'tis the season for cybersecurity, but really it's all seasons. So there's all kinds of different things that you can do to better protect yourselves and your companies, and even on a personal level as well. And these practices that we're mentioning today, we're also using in-house at NetGain. It's like the think before you click, the ongoing training and education. That's something we practice ourselves. As we've brought up, your people can be not only your greatest point of vulnerability, but also one of your strongest too, when they are educated and informed and communicating with your internal IT team about maybe some stuff that's coming across their inboxes or whatnot. So with that, I'll close out my rant on that, but I want to take the last few minutes that we've got together today here to address some of the questions that our attendees have posed to the group. So let me take a quick look at the chat over here. So I've got one question that pertains to some of the data breaches that we brought up at the beginning of the webinar. what should I do? Let's see. I have an Uber or U-Haul account. What should I do? So,
first thing I
Bruce,
would
do you want to take this?
Yes. First thing I would do is review all your financial information that's tied to U-Haul and Uber. Look at your credit card statements. Look at your credit history. Do you see anything out of the ordinary there? Both sites on their security link for their security division, reach out to them. Ask them, was my data breached? There are steps that they have to take in order to take care of you, such as offering, some companies offer a year of identity theft protection. They vary from company to company, so I'd refer to those companies' websites. But start your investigation now. If you want a quick and easy way to see if you've been involved in any breaches, you can go to haveibeenpawned.com, put your email address in, and it will actually list any breaches that any type of information tied to your email account that you use for those services were involved in.
I would say like a really quick thing they could do would be to update all their passwords across the board.
and right, the very first thing I would do is absolutely go and change my password. And please, I hope I don't offend anybody, but please don't let your password be summer 2022 ! And you change it to fall 2022. Make it something really super hard for them to figure out, something that you can remember, but hard for them to figure out.
Passphrases, right, Bruce? Passphrases.
That's if the company supports it. A majority of them do, but I have seen some that they're like, oh no. So then I bust out my password manager and generate a very long password and try to remember it.
Yeah, that's the challenge then. Let's see. So we've got a few more questions. Here is one. What kind of security awareness training would you recommend? Aaron, I'm going to toss this question over to you.
Sure. There are a ton of training tools out there that you can utilize, but just to narrow it down, a couple that we actually use here at NetGain and manage would be Arctic Wolf's Managed Security Awareness program, and then another platform called KnowBe4. With KnowBe4, not only do we manage that for our clients, but that's a platform that Braxton actually spoke about earlier that we use in-house here at NetGain for our own employees, for ourselves. The security team doesn't manage it, so we get simulated phishing emails just like everyone else, and they're good. They're good. Sometimes they come from coworkers. Yeah, they are good, because we're not immune. Everyone needs training. No one is immune. But the KnowBe4 is great. It combines security awareness training with simulated phishing attacks, and it makes you, be a little more vigilant. Kind of play detective. And it sort of gamifies reading emails. Not that reading emails isn't exciting enough, but what I mean by gamify is, we have a phish button alert on our email. So if we see a sketchy email or something that we think could be fishy, you hit that button, and it might be a simulated attack that was sent by your IT, and a box pops up and it says, congrats, you reported a simulated phishing attack from your IT department. Right. Makes you feel good, it makes you feel, like a detective that cracked the case. But ultimately, without you really knowing it, it's keeping you on your toes so you can spot those real phishing emails. So right. It's an invaluable tool.
And in the lines of monitoring services, we utilize Arctic Wolf, but there are other companies that do it also. Is your dark web monitoring. So they have a service where they actually go out and scour many more breach sites that have data on the dark web than I have access to even. And they've got scripts that go out and look for whatever username at whateverbusiness.com and then provide us a report of hey, we found this out there, and we'll investigate. Is it an actual user that's still currently at the organization, or have they moved on, and we don't have any action? But if it's an actual user at a client, then we'll engage and work with the client to get that user's password changed, depending on when it was breached, right? So, having a dark web monitoring piece to me is pretty important.
Okay, I'm going to see if we can maybe bust through a couple more questions here. Now this one, we didn't really touch on this topic in this presentation, but I mean, it's relevant. It's security. Should I get cyber insurance, and how difficult is it to get? Braxton, I'm going to toss this to you. I've tossed the other two questions to Aaron and Bruce. You're the next one up.
Yeah, I'll try to. That's okay. I'll try to keep this concise, even though this is probably again another webinar topic. But yeah, you should get cyber insurance. Absolutely. Now, what's been happening is that if we call back to ransomware becoming more and more prevalent the last 2 to 3 years, cyber insurance companies have started to lose money because they, number one, weren't aware of how the landscape was changing to that, but also they weren't doing their due diligence and making sure that their prospective customers were doing what they needed to be doing. So they weren't secure enough. They were getting hit, and then they were having to pay out. So cyber insurance coverage, what is mostly going to happen, and what we typically see, is that they will help you financially when it comes to like recovery and remediation services. Some might offer to you that they will negotiate for you. Some might offer to you that they will help you with the financial hit if you are in a situation where you have to pay the ransom. But our suggestion, our path is that you don't pay the ransom anyway. So they're going to help you with recovery and remediation, and that's most likely where they're going to want to go. Now, in terms of how hard it is, well, it kind of depends on what coverage you need and what you want. The more you want, the more coverage you need, the more strict you're going to have to be, and they're going to be. I've seen insurance applications be 2 pages to 25 pages. So the best way to combat that, in my opinion, would probably be start getting a risk assessment done that will align you to a cybersecurity framework, so that you start getting those cybersecurity best practices implemented. Yep. And then whatever control cyber insurance companies might want you to have, you'll already have in place.
And the one consistent theme across all the applications that I've seen so far this year is an absolute requirement is at a minimum for MFA to be put on email access, remote access such as remote desktop, and then any kind of enterprise administrative IT account should have MFA enabled by default, and if that you have to have those in place. I've seen that on every single cybersecurity insurance contract or application, this year so far.
Speaking of MFA and cyber insurance, the only reason I know this is because I've been privy to some of Scott Logan, our director of security, some of his recent presentations on cyber insurance is that can be definitely a requirement for some cyber insurance policies, and for some it's if you don't have it, you don't even qualify for cyber insurance. So yeah, especially this past year, the requirements for that have gotten much steeper, I guess would be the best way to put it. Let's see. Okay, so we're right up at time. I was going to ask another more question. We'll follow up directly with anybody who has questions we weren't able to answer. But wrapping up our webinar today, huge thank you to the security team and all of the insights and experience they've shared around these frightful cybersecurity stories. Hopefully this session provided some helpful guidance and insights for everyone, and you were able to come away from this webinar with some ideas of maybe how to better strategize and position the security of your organization for better success and just better peace of mind throughout the end of this year and even into the next year, and long-term, short-term, all of the above. Finally, we will be sharing the details around this webinar in an email with a link to the recording and some additional information soon. So look for that to be shared within the next few days. And with that, I will close the webinar, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their Wednesday. So thank you for joining us, and be sure to reach out if there's anything you've got questions about or would like more information on. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Caroline.